Good morning, everyone. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this showcase of our really incredible 2021 and 22 Main Street Fellows. My name is Perry Williams, and I'm a program coordinator for Maine Development Foundation and the Maine Downtown Center. Over the past couple months, I have been given the privilege of working directly with the Main Street Fellows and their host sites, Heart of Biddeford and Discover Downtown Westbrook, as they completed their service terms, bringing critical support to their organizations and towns. At the beginning of their service, the Fellows pledged to strengthen communities, take action, seek common ground, and most importantly, to get things done. This year, Megan and Chloe have done exactly that and more. Today, we are so excited to have the Fellows present on their efforts to maintain that pledge through brief talks outlining their experiences both personally and professionally as Fellows. While the talks will not be a comprehensive overview of their achievements, the Fellows will also be participating in a Q&A panel at the end of today's program, which will outline more of those accomplishments. A few housekeeping things before getting started. Please keep your microphones muted through today's presentation, but feel free to celebrate and cheer on the Fellows through the chat feature or with the sticker reactions. And the chat will also be used later on in the Q&A portion of the program to field questions from for our Fellows. To kick things off today, I am happy to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Kaylin O'Brien, to speak on the Main Street Fellows program and its impact over the past couple years. Dr. O'Brien currently works at WEX as the Global Talent Planning and Processes Manager and serves as the Main Street Fellows Program Committee Chair. And we're really lucky to have her. So Kaylin, I will go ahead and hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Perry. I'm having deja vu to this time. Well, I guess it was a little earlier in the year, but when we did last year's Fellows Showcase, and thinking about, just how much has happened over the last year and how much has happened since I got a fated call from Adam, however long ago it was now, when the program was just starting off, asking if I'd like to join the committee and serve as the chair. And at that particular point in time in my own transition to living and working in Maine and integrating myself into the great communities that are a part of our state, I found myself at this inflection point where I wanted to learn more about the people who made this place that I had decided to call home, a place that I wanted to grow and continue to be a part of. So I jumped at the opportunity to dive in, but admittedly didn't know much about the Fellows program. But now, looking back on all that's been able to occur over the last couple of years with the program and the work of the Fellows and the communities that they've been supported, I'm glad that I said yes to what felt like a very, very out of the blue request at the time, because I think it's been really impactful for me. And then I know for everyone that's been impacted by the work of the Fellows, it's been a really positive experience. And so when they asked me to share some reflections, I definitely had a little bit of trouble trying to decide what to talk about. I still, in my conversations with folks who are exploring different parts of Maine, trying to decide maybe where they want to move to or where they want to live or where they want to work, I often reference a lot of what I've learned through our current and former Fellows in terms of the work that they did in the communities that they've been a part of. So there was lots of options for what I would choose to reflect on for a few minutes with you all. So what I'm going to do is talk about a core component of how the Fellows program was structured, which is this idea of allowing the Fellows to gain what was referred to as place-based experience to increase equity and local resilience and social capital within the communities that they support. And for me, the notion of place-based and this idea of how the Fellows would both come to cultivate, I think, for themselves, a sense of place and a sense of community in terms of how they got to be integrated into these communities that they became a part of through their fellowships. But also, I think, zooming out a little bit from specifically just the Fellows and their experiences and kind of this broader, bigger world that we're all trying to navigate right now. Sense of place has always been something that stands out to me as an idea that I wish we talked about more. When you're trying to join a community and you're a newcomer, how do you build sense of place in a place that is unfamiliar to you, that maybe doesn't feel communal yet because you're a new arrival? I think maybe some of our Fellows might resonate with that experience, knowing that some of them, relocated to be a part of the communities that they ultimately served in. But then I just think for us as everyday people, as a part of communities, both the communities that we live in, the communities that we may be a part of as a result of how we choose to spend our personal time or our professional time. This idea of place-based, I think, requires a degree of intentionality that I saw in both this year's fellows and Chloe and Megan, and then all of the fellows past. You could see as they all came to the end of their fellowship experience, and I don't want to jump the gun because I know that today you're going to hear Megan and Chloe reflect directly on their own experience. I'm not going to, try to do their reflections for them. But from what I've heard, that idea of intentionally showing up into a community and being willing to dive in and say, I'm going to be a part of this place. And I want to learn about this place, and I want to be intentional in terms of how I show up. I saw that, and I continue to see it in the work that the fellows did and have done. And that for me, I think is something that really exemplifies the unique value add that this program and these fellowship experiences brought to the communities that the fellows were able to be a part of. So I just want to bring that to light as we dive into the conversation today, this idea of sense of place and what it means and how it connects to what it actually means to sustain and increase resiliency for the communities that we're all a part of. So I'm going to turn it back to Perry, but I'm eager for the conversation. I'm thankful for all of the program committee members that have been able to support this program over the last 2 years, to folks like Perry and Joe and Adam. I see they're on the call too, and everyone at MDF who's done what was needed over the last couple of years to keep this program alive amidst some really challenging times. I think it would be a miss on my part if I didn't call out that a fellowship program intended to increase resiliency in communities that happened to occur during one of the times that resilience was most required of us in our communities, I think is a particularly poignant thing for us to recognize that that's what we were able to achieve over the last 2 years, given the context and the world that we're all living, surviving, and hopefully thriving in. So those are my reflections, eager to dive into the conversation after we hear from Chloe and Megan and be a part of the Q&A, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Kaylin, for your very wise words and reflections. But most importantly, thank you for your mentorship to the fellows and your commitment to making this program the best it can be. I would now like to introduce our first fellow who will be presenting today. We have Miss Megan Hageney. Megan comes to us from Houston, Texas, though she considers herself a dual resident of California and Texas. She has an MBA from the University of Houston with a focus on entrepreneurship and consulting. Megan served her term as a Main Street Fellow with Heart of Biddeford. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Megan.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Perry. So as Perry mentioned, I'm from Houston, Texas, and I was there almost a year ago, and I was grabbing lunch with a friend and telling her I was moving to Maine to do a DI fellowship. And she was completely in shock because Houston is one of the most diverse places in the country for a variety of reasons. And I'm going to a town of 22,000 to learn DEI. After she got over her initial shock, she said, yeah, this should be an interesting year. And it certainly has been. So fast forward, in October, I start my fellowship at Heart of Biddeford. And I just do as much research as I can on what does DEI look like at a nonprofit level. And so the first lesson that comes up is language shedding, because I'm pretty sure some of y'all are like, what is even DEI? So DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I like to use a dinner party metaphor to explain it further. So diversity is the variety of lived experiences. So does my invite guests represent people from all walks of life? Inclusion is about feelings of safety and belonging. So does everyone feel comfortable dictating what they want on the dinner menu, what their preferences are, any allergies or restrictions they may have? And then equity is regardless of individual differences, does everyone have the same outcome? So regardless of what time people showed up or what time people left, did everyone leave feeling the same amount of full? And the second lesson that came up with all my research is it's really important to have a diversity of voices around the table. And let me tell you, in Maine, that's much easier said than done. So that December, I meet with my DEI committee and we have an honest conversations about what lived experiences don't we have at the table. And one of the ones we highlighted was we don't have any new Mainers at our table. You know, everyone that was on the committee was born in the United States, and that was really important to us to get that perspective because Biddeford has a growing new Maine population. And so one of our fantastic board members and committee members, Sam, connected us with someone who I'll just call Simon for discretionary purposes. And he agreed to be on our committee. And we were thrilled because Simon is a New Mainer from Angola. He speaks French. He's also younger, which we didn't have at that table too. And he has a PhD in economic development. So our first call in January with him, he's on for the first 10 minutes and then hops off. And so I don't really think anything of it because, you know, Zoom and tech issues happen all the time. So then February, our next meeting, he pops on 15 minutes in the middle of the call and then pops off. So I go to Sam, who has a personal relationship with Simon, and ask, hey, can you please just check in with him and see if there's anything we can do to support him? So Sam reports back and says, you know, Simon has to work multiple jobs. And one of the jobs he has to do is Ubering to help his uncle make ends meet. And so when we get him for those 10 or 15 minutes, that's literally all the time he could afford to volunteer us because those are the time between car rides. And my initial reactions was I was completely heartbroken, but also really frustrated because this downtown is just as much my downtown as it is Simon's downtown. And yet, because of these barriers, he can't have a say in decisions that impact his downtown. And so it kind of makes you wonder too, how many other community members don't we hear from and who can't decide on their own downtown because they have the same barriers? And so to extend the dinner party analogy from earlier, because I think oftentimes a traditional dinner party looks like how nonprofits traditionally make decisions of you'll come to me, I'll set the time, I'll set the location, and for those who can make it, fantastic. And for those who don't, we don't hear from you and you can't participate. And so there's really a cost to being at our decision-making table. Our fantastic board members can easily volunteer 8 hours a month, but not every member of the community can do that. And so it's oftentimes the minority and oftentimes the privileged minority of the city that's making decisions for our downtown. And so it really made me think and about my most impactful dinners. And like I said, I'm from Houston, and in 2017, Harvey hit. And so our house was completely destroyed. But during that time, I had some of the most amazing dinners where I felt the biggest sense of community. And they were just completely non-traditional, where there would be picnics in our backyards with volunteers that came to help, or potlucks with our neighbors, or the church throwing a party at the local park to feed us dinner. And so then something clicked with me. You know, we shouldn't be putting the burden on the underserved to be heard. We should really take that responsibility and open up our decision-making process to as many community members as possible. And when we started doing that, the returns were so significant. So fast forward to June. Sam, again, our fantastic board member, lets us speak to his English as a second language class. And there were 8 adults in the room from Laos, Angola, Afghanistan, and Venezuela. And it was just the most incredible 1-hour meeting. It was a DEI committee meeting rolled up with design, organization, business enhancements, promotions. It was incredible. And when we started meeting people where they're at, just the qualitative and quantitative results were remarkable. You know, I got almost 8 hours total of incredible community input, where just months prior, I may be hearing from them about that experience for 10 to 15 minutes at a time. Another thing that came from that conversation that was really great is, I'm going to call her Sally for discretionary purposes. Sally told me that she moved to Biddeford from Afghanistan late last fall. And even though she lives right outside of her downtown, she only went to the Middle Eastern grocery store and she didn't feel welcome really anywhere else. And also because we extended our decision-making table to her, she was able to advocate for her family And so they were great cooks. So in July for our art walk, we hired her family to cater it. And it just made a really cool, unique element to the event that brought more people in. We became her first customers in the United States. And then after engaging us with the vendor, her and her family, which was a fantastic 3 generations, participated in the art walk and walked away and throughout our downtown smiling. And so, yeah, my year here has been incredibly interesting. And one of my biggest lessons I've learned is if you want to make people feel welcome in your downtown, you have to let them be decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. Everyone, feel free to blow up the chat with your applause and congrats. It's been really inspiring to watch Megan dive into her DEI work throughout her service, and I feel like I've learned a lot from her throughout that process as well. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our next fellow, Chloe Hepburn. Chloe is a lifelong Mainer coming to us from Elliott, Maine. Chloe has her Bachelor of Science in Business Management with a minor in Spanish from the University of Maine, Orono. She served her term as a fellow with Discover Downtown Westbrook. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and hand it off to Chloe.
All right, thank you so much for the introduction, Terry, and great job, Megan. I'm just gonna dive right in, thank you. So in April 2020, I was standing in line at a bank in Orono. I was pulling out euros for an upcoming spring break trip when I received a text message from my friend at the school paper. It was a screenshot of a leaked email from the president of the University of Maine revealing that classes would be converted to online for the rest of the year and that all students were to evacuate the campus by the end of that week. Like a lot of students experience, that week was just pure chaos. I found out that my experience was being cut short on a Wednesday, and by Friday, the campus was a complete ghost town. The student government held a makeshift graduation ceremony for us. There were student bands, lots of free food and merchandise, and the dean even came to officiate it. I marched through our dining hall. I was sobbing with my friends. I elbow bumped the dean, and then I received a flimsy elementary school diploma along with a pump of hand sanitizer. And that was my college graduation. I stared at that diploma through watery eyes, and I didn't see it as an accomplishment or something to celebrate, because not only was my time in college being cut short by a matter of months, I had actually graduated a full year early, straight into the apocalypse. I had been dying to get out of academia as soon as I enrolled in classes. I wanted to be in the real world, so I took classes throughout the summers and the winters, and I overloaded my schedule with credits so that I could get out of there as quickly as possible. I looked at that diploma and I realized that it was my ticket into the real world. And I also realized that I was in no way ready to grow up. That day, I graduated at 20 years old with a degree in business management and a minor in Spanish, and I couldn't even legally buy a drink to celebrate. As I searched for an entry-level job in my field, I faced a recurring feeling that I was just underqualified for every position that I applied to. Having graduated college in two and a half years and having very little professional work experience, I couldn't really imagine who would want to hire me or what I brought to the table. So I decided to take a break from the job search and pick up a few restaurant jobs to just indulge myself with something that was within my comfort zone and skill set. But I eventually built up the confidence to start up the job search again, and that's when I found my position at Discover Downtown Westbrook. I decided that I would go into my service year with the intention to just learn and gain skills that I felt that I lacked from a lack of schooling and experience. The nagging feeling that I was still underqualified continued to follow me, though. It followed me into my first week of service. I didn't really feel like I knew what I was supposed to be doing, even though I had a great support system with Discover Downtown Westbrook and the main downtown center. But one day, my supervisor, Amy, ordered herself a desk for our new office. It arrived in a massive box and it had a little booklet of assembly instructions. And seeing as I felt inadequate sitting at my desk, I saw this as the perfect opportunity to appear busy and procrastinate actually learning about my service year. There were 37 steps to building the desk, and it took me a full day, but I gradually turned a big pile of slats and screws into a big, beautiful L-shaped desk. While I did most of the building on my own, I did ask for help a few times when it came to maneuvering this big, bulky piece of furniture. And when I was done, I had an oddly strong sense of pride when it was finished. And I realized that assembling the desk was no different than completing my service year. because looking at my service year as a whole felt really daunting and overwhelming to me. But if I broke it down into small, bite-sized pieces, it was much more attainable. If I could apply the same principles that I used to building the desk to my service year, then I might just be able to figure out what I'm doing. If I asked for help when I needed it, if I asked questions, but these are hard things to do when you're struggling with imposter syndrome. I gradually started to get my footing in my position, and I started to get to know the Westbrook community and see all of the opportunity that this up and coming town has. During a tour of the downtown, I was introduced to the Dana Wart Mill, which is a massive old mill building that is now home to 75 artists and small businesses. And I felt instantly like I had a connection to it. Growing up, I attended the Button Factory open house every year in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It's a holiday bazaar that takes place every year in December in a very similar old mill building that has also been taken over by artists in their studios. There's always live music and food, and you can get all of your holiday shopping done in one swoop, which is great. And as soon as I saw the Dana Wart Mill, I knew that I wanted to hold something similar there. So I started by having a phone interview with one of the organizers from the Button Factory, which then turned into an hour-long conversation with one consistent message of, don't even try to hold an event like that in the Dana Wart Mill. He said that the building was too big, there were too many studios, and that if it didn't go well, nobody would want to hold another event like there again. And hearing somebody doubt my idea turned out to be all that I needed, actually. And I left that conversation knowing that I was going to do everything in my power to make that event happen. His doubt felt like fuel to me because I realized that only I am allowed to doubt myself. And I decided then and there that I'm the only one that's allowed to feel like I am underqualified or inadequate or incapable. And anybody else who feels that way, it's just an excuse to prove them wrong. So I used the desk building approach when I was planning the open house of the Dana Wart Mill. I broke down the project into a manageable timeline. I asked for help when I needed it. I delegated the work, and I asked lots of questions. And the result was really beautiful. The landlord let us use a massive empty warehouse within the mill as a starting point for the event. And I strung up lights in there, we held live music, and we set out a buffet. And we gave all of our guests little passports and had them go around to each of the businesses and artists and stamp their passport as they went. And for every stamp they got, they would get one raffle ticket. So it kind of had a competitive edge to it as well, which was really fun. And it's hard to put it into words, but the energy that day was just so palpable. Like the artists from the mill were just elated that they could finally showcase their space to the community. And we received overwhelmingly positive feedback from the tenants of the mill and community members alike. There are so many people that walk by that mill every day and have no idea what happens inside. And as that day unfolded, I kept hearing the words from the organizer from the Button Factory just ringing in my ears. And his doubt made that day a little extra rewarding, and as did my own self-doubt. And I kind of realized through this experience that imposter syndrome just kind of doubles down on itself. And when I found myself feeling inadequate, I would become reluctant to ask questions or seek help. And I didn't really want to know anybody I didn't want anybody to know that I was incapable of being a young professional. And then as a result, I ended up feeling even more inadequate. But luckily, I stumbled upon the opportunity to build that desk, and it really shifted my perspective. From that one tactile experience, I realized that asking questions and seeking help is the only way to grow as a person and as a professional. And the next time that I find myself doubting my potential, I know that I'm going to enjoy the process of growing and gaining new skills a little bit more. I'm going to use my sense of imposter syndrome as a motivator to prove myself wrong. And I would like to finish by just encouraging you all to lean into that feeling of not knowing, because a world of opportunity opens up when you stop striving for perfection and start striving for growth instead. Because we're all here to build each other up and help each other learn, even if it's from something as simple as assembling a desk from IKEA. But then again, who am I to offer advice to a group of professionals? So, thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chloe. It's been really a pleasure watching you embrace creativity through your service and to take those leaps that have led to such great rewards. Everybody feel free to blow up the chat with your congratulations for both Megan and Chloe. That does conclude our talks for today. We are really fortunate to have had such an incredible second cohort of fellows, and I feel personally very lucky to have gotten to know them and work with them throughout their service. I'd now like to welcome Ann Ball, who has also had the privilege of working hands-on with this program as Senior Program Director of the Maine Downtown Center, and will be leading the Q&A panel discussion with the fellows. So I will go ahead and hand it off to her now.
There we are. Great job, Megan and Chloe. Thank you so much. As a reminder to everyone, we are here in a hybrid environment. We have 11 members of the Maine Downtown Center Advisory Council in the room here at our MDF offices. And then we have another crowd of people out attending via Zoom remotely. So we would love to have you put questions or comments in the chat. But I really want to reflect on how great it is to have fellows as part of our Main Street program. And it's been amazing for me to get to watch Chloe and Megan and see the impact on their communities. And I have some questions prepared, but like I said, I'd love to have a few questions from the from the audience. I'm just going to say for me personally, Megan, I'm just going to quote you, we shouldn't put the burden on the underserved. And what a great reminder for all of us when we're thinking about community and economic development work. And I'm going to quote Chloe, hearing someone doubt my idea was all I needed. And that is just a great inspiration that we all need to hear once in a while as we are trying to build resilient communities. So you guys are amazing, and huge gratitude. So I thought it would be fun for you guys to share with our in-person and virtual audiences. And I'll start with you, Megan, and then we'll have Chloe go. What are you planning to take with you moving forward from your fellows service into whatever lies ahead with your next chapter?
Yeah, so by my very nature, I'm pretty impatient. And then oftentimes with doing DI work, it's like, oh, we need to do all these incredible radical changes. But one thing I learned from my fellowship that I really want to take forward, it's the small things you do day in and day out that really make the biggest differences over time. So I like to think of like when a plane's taking off, if they do 2 inches to one direction, they can land up completely somewhere else. So yeah, just thinking about small sustainable changes.
Great, and such a good reminder for all of us involved in Main Street. One of the tenets of the Main Street program is incremental. So I think we agree with you wholeheartedly. Chloe, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like my service here has really strengthened my professional communication skills. I am a natural born procrastinator, so this has been a really great experience for me to kind of budget my time differently and actually give myself a schedule. So that was a great thing that I picked up. And on top of that, being able to coordinate and communicate with several different other nonprofits and organizations in the downtown to meet that timeline as well. So there's a lot that was floating around, and it was really a great practice to kind of give myself some concrete work to be doing.
Sounds like you are a community and economic development professional, Chloe. Would you both, and this time I'll start with Chloe, would you be willing to share from your experience in Westbrook, what insights you have on how to build community?
Yeah, I think that kind of my biggest takeaway was that it can all really start at an interpersonal level, and just kind of getting that practice of just going out to the community and introducing yourself and starting with just one-on-one interactions, and building professional relationships and friendships that way. That can really help tie in different community members and kind of pushing yourself to access members of the community that you wouldn't typically run into on a daily basis. But I started by going to the Daily Grind, the coffee shop right next to us every single day. And because of that, I now know the owners and they're great. And I feel like so much more of a community, or part of the community, just because I know their names. And I feel like if you start on that level, then having organizational relationships kind of come naturally after that.
Such a great point, the power of building relationships. And we have lots of Main Street directors, both on Zoom and in this room, and I think they absolutely agree. Walking the streets and building those relationships is key. Megan, would you like to reflect on that?
Yeah, just to add to Chloe's great answer, our executive director, Delilah, consistently says, and it's a great reminder, to go at the speed of connection. Because again, I'm pretty impatient, but sometimes with folks, especially if like they're an under-resourced partner, just making sure, yeah, going at that speed of that relationship is always really important.
Absolutely. And every relationship's on a different timeline, isn't it? I seem to remember a story, and Delilah, I see raising her hand, so I should let her tell this story, but she used to go visit the downtown like TV store or something, Delilah, and every year you would just stop in and say hello, and they would never really give you the time of day. And then one year, after many years, I believe they said, "You're doing a good job," or something simple like that. So yeah. Delilah, you have your hand up.
That was a long awaited, but I was not holding my breath for that to happen. Megan, I was just wondering, if you just mentioned moving at the speed of relationships, if you might also talk about pacing for privilege and how those have to be balanced, basically.
Yeah, completely. So pacing for privilege, Adam shared this fantastic article at the beginning of my fellowship of common DI detours. Highly recommend reading it. But one that we consistently reference in our office is pacing for privilege. So while it's important to think about the pacing, especially in terms of like under-resourced partners or community members, it's also really important not to pace for the most privileged person in the room, because at that point it wouldn't be incrementalism, we would be going backwards.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that and bringing that up, Delilah. Great layer for us all to include in our thinking. Are there questions in this room that anybody wants to ask of our fellows, or are there any questions in the chat? Let me just double check the chat.
I don't have anything from the chat right at the moment, but Megan and Chloe, if you could share one thing that you're hoping for the future of your community or organization, I think we'd all love to hear that too.
That's great. Megan, why don't we start with you?
Okay. So another thing that came from that really great article is the diversity detour, and Heart of Bitterford's great at it, and I really hope we just continue doing it, which is, it's really important to celebrate diversity and inclusion, but when you're not addressing equity in any of your programming, at that point it comes off as exploitation.
Thank you. Chloe, would
Yeah,
you like
I would,
to talk about that? Yeah.
yeah, I would just say Discover Downtown Westbrook is such a great organization, and it's also so young. So I think that my hope is that we, the organization, just takes the momentum that we have right now and continues to run with it, because we are, in the past year, we've gotten so much more involved with other community members and organizations, and I feel like it's just kind of been a ripple effect of kind of the impact that this organization can have on the community. And it's been so wonderful having Heart of Biddeford kind of as our counterpart, and also just as someone that we can look up to and like aspire towards, and seeing all the work that they do has just been incredible. So it's great that we have organizations to kind of base our future off of and continue to go with this momentum until we're established in the community. And yeah, that's my hope for it.
That's great. There was a question, Megan, asking you to expand on your answer to that question about what you hope for.
Sorry, sometimes I speak in shorthand. So an example of that is like with Juneteenth, or African American History Month in February, you know, if I'm just doing celebrations around that, but I'm not promoting or helping the Black-owned businesses in my community. Or one thing that Delilah does that's really fantastic is working with the police officers to make sure, because sorry, I really don't want to get like super political, but working with police officers in those community relationships. If I'm not addressing like these inequities that are causing discrepancies and just celebrating like, oh, happy Juneteenth, I'm addressing it at the most surface level and not addressing the inequities that cause discrepancies. Does that make sense, Amy?
Yes, you had closed with saying that if you're doing the first two, but you're not doing equity, it results in I forget the word you used.
Oh, exploitation.
Exploitation. And so that's what you meant by that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. How about discussing a bit about how AmeriCorps members are assumed to be young and inexperienced and therefore less capable? How does that sit with the two of you, or how do you counteract that? Chloe, you ready to take a stab at that question?
Sure. I resonate with that question for sure, because I feel like I've definitely internalized kind of that assumption that I'm like too young or anything to like have any real impact. But I think just kind of realizing that like I, as an AmeriCorps member, don't really have anything to prove to anybody. Like I am here to complete my service year and like make an impact and do everything that I pledged to do at the beginning of my service year. And I just don't really feel like I have to jump through hoops to prove that like I'm a professional or that like I'm capable of actually making change, because actions kind of speak louder than that. And yeah, I don't know if that answered the question fully, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think so. Megan, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I kind of experienced that stigma, but it's also really interesting where I've been on the flip side in nonprofits and kind of had that stigma for AmeriCorps, where it's like, you'll be gone in a year. And so it was kind of karma. One of the best ways to counteract that is just to have results. And so saying, yeah, even though I'm here for a year, it actually kind of incentivizes me to accelerate getting things done. And yeah, and so I think relationships with community partners were definitely better once there was results to point out.
Absolutely. Data can be really powerful. And Perry put in the chat, I think your experience and professionalism has shown through your service. So let me see, any other comments or questions? Great. So I think I just want to make a couple closing chats before handing it back to Perry. One last question from Joanna. What are your plans for the fall? Who wants to take a stab at that last question today? Chloe.
I can start if you want. Hi, Joanna. Thank you so much for joining. I initially, when I graduated college 2 years ago, I was planning on going to teach English in Spain for a year. And then obviously with COVID, I was not able to do that. So I'm finally getting the chance to do it. So I leave in September and I'll be doing that for a year. And I'm intentionally not making any plans for myself afterwards. So that's my next step. And I have no idea what's going to come next. And that feels really nice.
Very exciting. Megan.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for the question. We miss you. That's a really great question, which I'm not sure of.
That's great. I love it. It's how you landed in Maine, Megan. So it happens. Wait till it comes. So thank you both so much. And I will say, it is really sad that we will not be continuing this program in 2022-23. But MDF is committed to continuing this type of impactful experience for young professionals interested in community and economic development and community resilience in some way. So we are committed to figuring out what that will look like in the future. Yeah, and thank goodness we had 2 years of fellows that showed us that this is really such an amazing way to work in our communities and provide capacity and amazing work at the local level. So we can't thank Megan and Chloe and Perry for being part of the inaugural year. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back to Perry for some closing comments. Let me unspotlight everybody as quickly as I can. And Perry, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Anne. I just want to take the last few minutes here to go ahead and give some thanks to those who made this program possible. Thanks again, Anne, Kaylin, and every other person who helped make today possible. Adam Burke, Joanna Crisp, thank you for your continued mentorship and guidance to the fellows. To the program committee, thank you for being the sounding board that has allowed this program to evolve into the second year. To Volunteer Maine for their continued program support and guidance, and to MDF for making this program possible. Thank you to the host site supervisors for playing maybe the largest role in ensuring a positive experience for our fellows. And of course, to all of you who showed up today to support Megan and Chloe. Finally, I would like to personally say thank you to the fellows for your dedication to service, for your resiliency, and for showing just grace and just passion in your work. I truly don't think that we can celebrate you enough, but I'm going to spend the next month trying. It was really great to have everyone here today. Thanks again for joining and celebrating with us, and have a great rest of your Thursday.